to The Deep Dive, the show where we dig into your source materials and pull out the really key insights. Today we're looking at Austria. It's a relatively small, landlocked country in Central Europe, but it definitely punches way above its weight, historically and even now.
It really does.
Our mission here is to take all this information you've given us and sort of distill what's going on with Austria's conflicts, its politics, the economy, and its, well, incredibly rich culture.
Yeah.
The goal really is a shortcut for you to get you well informed, maybe uncover some surprising facts along the way. Okay, let's unpack this.
It's a great topic. Austria's story, it's this fascinating mix, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got empire, then this deep commitment to neutrality, and this constant reinvention.
Yeah.
It's definitely not a dull story. It's always had to juggle these big external forces while figuring out its own identity inside.
Absolutely. And you can't really grasp Austria without looking at where it is on the map. I mean, literally and, figuratively.
Oh.
Picture it. This mountainous heart right in the center of Europe. You've got Germany, Switzerland, Italy, Slovenia, Hungary, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, even tiny Liechtenstein, all bordering it.
Quite the neighborhood.
Exactly. And that spot, especially along the Danube River and through those key alpine passes, well, it wasn't just a convenient route. For centuries, it made Austria a massive crossroads. Trade, people, ideas.
Yeah, a real hub.
And that geography from Roman times through the Habsburgs, it just constantly put Austria right in the middle of Europe's power struggles. It really shaped its destiny.
And that's the core of it, isn't it? That prime real estate, it's been both a huge advantage and a constant challenge. It forced Austria to navigate all these external pressures while also figuring out, who are we? It's fascinating how that location has just relentlessly influenced its path.
And that constant pressure definitely contributed to let's say a turbulent past, if we go back to the 19th century.
Yeah.
Austria was the center of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Huge, multi-ethnic, sprawling.
A real patchwork.
Totally. But managing all these different groups, Germans, Hungarians, Czechs, Slovaks, loads of others, was incredibly difficult. There were constant fights over power.
You bet.
Like the franchise question, basically, who gets the right to vote? That created huge friction, especially between German liberals and Slavic groups who were demanding, equality.
Right.
And here's where it gets really interesting, just as an example. In 1895, something as simple as introducing Slovene language classes into a German school, it actually caused the government to collapse. It just shows how incredibly deep those ethnic and linguistic tensions ran.
It really does. And those early struggles, they didn't just disappear. They really laid the groundwork for a lot of Austria's modern challenges, shaping how it deals with diversity and identity even now. You can see the echoes.
Definitely. So fast forward into the 20th century, World War I happens, the empire collapses. Austria is left as this small republic, but with massive problems.
Huge problems.
War reparations just crippled the economy. Inflation went wild in 1922. The country almost completely fell apart.
It was incredibly close.
But then Chancellor Ignaz Seipel, he was actually a priest turned politician. He manages this financial miracle, basically getting a big loan from the League of Nations. But there was a crucial string attached. Austria had to promise to stay independent for 20 years. No merging with Germany.
The independence clause. Very important.
But internally, things were still a mess. Socialists and conservatives were constantly at odds. It all boiled over in 1934 with the Austro-fascist dictatorship under Engelbert Dollfuss. He banned all other political parties.
A very grim turn.
And then, of course, the really pivotal moment, 1938, the Anschluss. Nazi Germany just annexes Austria, calls it the Ostmark, end of the First Republic.
Yeah.
So after World War II, Austria is occupied by the Allies, Soviets, Americans, British, French. It takes until 1955 to get the Austrian State Treaty, which restored its full sovereignty.
Finally independent again.
But, like you said, there was a big catch baked into that treaty. Permanent neutrality.
The cornerstone.
Exactly. And that principle just completely defined Austria's foreign policy for decades. It became this essential buffer zone between the communist East and the capitalist West during the Cold War. And Vienna especially really flourished as this neutral ground, hosting the UN, OPEC, major international summits. It became a real diplomatic hub.
But being neutral, it hasn't always been straightforward, has it? I mean, in practice?
No. Definitely.
You look at 1991, for instance, Austria granted overflight rights for the U.S.-led coalition during the Gulf War.
Yeah.
that certainly raised some questions about what neutrality meant.
Right.
And since joining the EU in 95, it's had this delicate dance. It engages with NATO through the Partnership for Peace program, but avoids full membership. It really raises an important question. How does a nation actually maintain neutrality in a world that's so interconnected, so often in crisis?
It's a tough balancing act, and you see that playing out right now, especially with the Russia-Ukraine war.
Yeah.
Chancellor Karl Nehammer was very clear. Austria was neutral, is neutral, will remain neutral. Very firm statement.
Unambiguous.
But some critics are saying, well, okay, but has that stance kind of left Austria on the sidelines? They point back to the 1990s during the Balkan Wars. Back then, Austria was really active, pushing hard for UN peacekeeping, for sanctions against Yugoslavia. It had this reputation as a key mediator, a bridge builder.
And that seems to have faded somewhat.
Well, that's the argument, that maybe it's lost some of that diplomatic clout it once had.
And our sources suggest maybe there's a perception of less of a clear vision in foreign policy right now.
Yeah.
The current coalition, the ÖVP conservatives and the Greens.
Right, the first time they've governed together.
Exactly. It seems maybe they're pulled between focusing on European integration, which is vital, and dealing with very pressing domestic issues. So perhaps the external focus isn't quite what it was.
Yeah, it feels like maybe the focus has shifted inwards a bit while the world keeps demanding that outward engagement.
It's a common tension, I think.
And speaking of internal stuff, Austria's domestic politics. Wow, what a roller coaster recently.
Oh yeah, definitely dramatic.
You just have to think back to 2019 Idizagate. That video of Heinz Christian Strack, the leader of the far-right Freedom Party, the FPO.
Offering potential government contracts for favorable news coverage.
Exactly. It blew up the coalition he was in with the conservative ÖVP, led to snap elections.
And that's what brought in this unusual ÖVP Green government. A real first.
Historic, but it hasn't exactly been smooth sailing. You've got the conservative ÖVP under Chancellor Nehammer and the more progressive Greens. There have been obvious tensions.
You can imagine.
Especially over things like asylum policy. Remember the deportations during the pandemic? That caused friction.
Right.
And all the while, the FPO, the far-right party, they're still a major force. They came very close to potentially forming a government in 2024 before other parties blocked them, so...
What's all this political drama mean for, the average person living there? Well, I think the FPO's enduring strength points to these deeper conflicts within Austrian society itself.
Okay.
Our sources really highlight the impact of Austria taking in, over 150,000 refugees since 2015. That sparked huge debates about integration, national identity.
Still ongoing debates, I imagine.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, Sebastian Kurz, who led the ÖVP before he resigned amid corruption allegations in 2021.
Right, the young, dynamic chancellor.
Yeah. He really pushed a hard line on immigration, often sounding quite similar to the FPO, actually. It was a strategic move, it seems.
Kind of co-opting their message?
Perhaps. And this polarization, you see this clash between, say, Euroscepticism, anti-immigrant feelings on one side, and Austria's clear commitment to the EU on the other. It mirrors what's happening in many places.
True.
But it's important to remember, despite the noise, Austrians generally still really value being in the EU, especially for the economy. What is it, 68% of their trade is with other EU countries, Germany being the big one.
Yeah, that economic stability is huge. And speaking of the economy, Austria really is quite the powerhouse for its size.
It is remarkably so.
They have this social market economy. So basically capitalism, but with a really strong welfare state, lots of public services, a safety net.
Strong social partnership model.
And it worked incredibly well for a long time. They had basically full employment up until the 1970s.
An amazing record.
Today, the service sector is dominant. Tourism, healthcare, finance, that's about 70% of GDP. But industry is still very important too, especially making high quality stuff like auto parts.
Yeah, high value added manufacturing.
And the real backbone, small businesses. Like 88% of Austrian companies have fewer than 10 employees.
Wow, that's a huge percentage.
It really is. Now, obviously, they face challenges. The 2008 crisis hit them, COVID was tough, the Ukraine war drove up energy costs and inflation.
The same pressures many countries are facing.
For sure.
Yeah.
But they've shown resilience. They projected, 4% growth in 2022? Partly thanks to government programs like short-time work schemes that help businesses keep people employed.
They seem quite adept at managing those shocks. And those economic ties, they're global, but really centered on Europe.
Right.
Germany's the #1 partner by far, then Italy, the U.S. And joining the euro back in 2002, swapping the shilling, that obviously tied them even closer into the EU economy.
Made trade much easier.
Exactly. And foreign companies love investing there, especially in tech and R&D. Why? Political stability, great infrastructure.
Plus, Vienna is always ranked incredibly high for quality of life.
Consistently near the top. World's most livable cities, year after year. It's that blend, isn't it? Economic strength and just a really high quality of life.
It is. But, beneath that success, there's maybe a little bit of unease about globalization, whether it might erode Austria's really high environmental and social standards. It's that balancing act again.
Always a balancing act. Now let's talk culture. Because when you think Austria, you think music. Mozart, Beethoven, Strauss.
Exactly. Classical music isn't just history there, it's alive. The Vienna State Opera, the Salzburg Festival, massive international draws.
Absolutely world class.
But it's not just the classics. Think about modern art. Gustav Klimt, Egon Schiele, they were groundbreaking. And today, Vienna has this really vibrant contemporary art scene, indie music. It's buzzing.
A real blend of tradition and modernity.
And, can't forget, Sigmund Freud developed psychoanalysis right there in Vienna, changed how we think about the mind.
A huge intellectual contribution. But that rich culture, it also becomes an arena for some of these internal debates we've talked about.
How so?
Well, our sources point to things like conflicts over access to abortion. It varies quite a bit from state to state within Austria.
Oh, okay.
And, more alarmingly, the number of femicides women killed, often by partners or ex-partners. There were 27 in 2023 alone. That highlights some really serious gaps in gender equality and protection policies.
That's shocking.
It is. And these kinds of issues, they really stir up the debate between the more progressive and the more conservative parts of society. It's a clash of values playing out.
And connecting culture back to Austria's place in the world, you have to talk about the Alps.
Oh, absolutely. Dominating the landscape.
They're not just beautiful, they're huge economic assets. Tourism is massive, skiing in Tyrol, hiking in Carinthia.
A major part of the economy.
And interestingly, they even play a role in diplomacy. Innsbruck hosts the main office for the Alpine Convention.
Right, that treaty for sustainable development across all the Alpine countries.
Yeah. It kind of shows how Austria leverages even its geography for international cooperation. Pretty smart.
It is. And yet those same Alps, in a way, they also kind of symbolize those internal divides, don't they?
What do you mean?
Well, often the mountainous rural areas are the conservative strongholds, politically and culturally. Whereas the cities, especially Vienna, are much more liberal hubs.
Ah, the urban-rural split. Yeah, you see that physically reflected.
Exactly. It's like a geographical representation of some of those cultural tensions.
So bringing it all together, where does Austria stand now?
Yeah,
It feels like a nation doing this constant juggling act.
that sums it up well.
Balancing its neutral history with being deeply embedded in the EU, trying to manage these populist waves while keeping its economy strong, and those internal fights over immigration, identity, how the country should be run, they feel very familiar, like things happening elsewhere in the world.
They definitely mirror global trends.
But Austria does have this history of finding compromise, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That 1905 Moravian deal between Czechs and Germans you mentioned earlier. They have found ways through deep divisions before.
That capacity for compromise, for social partnership, it's certainly part of their political DNA. So if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
externally, maybe Austria isn't quite the bold diplomatic mediator it was, say, back in the 90s.
Right.
But Vienna, still undeniably a crucial diplomatic capital, a place where the world meets.
Still punches above its weight there.
Definitely. And culturally, it's this incredible mix and imperial echoes alongside real modern energy. But it's still grappling, like many places, with what inclusion really means in an increasingly diverse society.
It really feels like Austria's story is Europe's story in miniature sometimes. A smaller nation with big ideas caught between its past and its future, between staying neutral and getting involved.
Yeah.
Whether it's trying to mediate conflicts far away or arguing fiercely over policies at home, it always seems to be at some kind of crossroads. So the questions remain, right? Will it find a way to be that influential diplomatic player again? Can it bridge those internal gaps, find those compromises needed for today's world?
Big questions for the future.
Yeah. One thing seems certain, though. This Alpine nation will probably keep surprising us.